Okay, a very good evening to everyone. My name is Dr. Nasser Ali, and on behalf of the Young Professional Society, I would like to welcome you to another one of our webinars, yet another webinar. We've been having a number of webinars during the last few days in the last week or so, different professionals coming in, speaking about different fields. And today we're delighted to have with us someone who's exceptionally good in his own profession, the legal profession, Barrister Khadim Al Hassan. And these webinars, if you've been following them, these have been designed to support personal professional development, trying to help the youngsters and provide some insights into different professions so that the youngsters find these useful and can benefit from these webinars. And today, as I said, we have a very important guest, our speaker, Barrister Khadim Hassan. And before we listen to Barrister Khadim, I would just like to mention some of the house rules. Please, if you could keep your microphones muted, so we don't want any disturbances, interruptions. So keep your mics muted. If you've got any questions, please do type them in the chat box, and Barrister Khadim will be able to answer at the end. We are live streaming on Facebook, so people who are joining us on Facebook, and if you've got any questions, please do type them in the comments box, and we'll read the questions out, and Barrister Khadim will answer. And this webinar is recorded like all our webinars. So after the recordings, we will be uploading this on our Young Professional Society YouTube channel. So people who've missed the live webinar will have an opportunity to watch afterwards. I think somebody's just asked how long the webinar is. We will try to wrap up within the hour. So the format of today's webinar is that Barrister Khadim will speak for up to around 30 minutes or so. He will present. He has some PowerPoint slides ready. And after he's completed, there'll be an opportunity for you all to ask some questions. So if you've got any questions, as I mentioned, you just type them in the chat box, or people watching us on Facebook, type your questions, and they'll be all answered. So hopefully we'll be finished before 8 o'clock, by 8 o'clock, or maybe a bit earlier, depending on the Q&A session. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Barrister Khadim to take over.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Nasser. This is a presentation from the Young Professional Society, and I'm honored to be able to give a little bit of an insight into what many people would want before they are going into the legal profession or wanting to go into the legal profession. Now, I'm sure many of you have watched many legal programs and TV series, and have always been very interested in what happens, not only in the courtroom, the drama that you often see, because Western Hollywood has a certain image of lawyers, and we've seen that on many occasions. But in the UK, it's a little bit more dignified in the way that courts are conducted. You may have seen Rumpole of the Bailey and cases like that. It's a bit more akin to real life, because there isn't the jumping up and down about objections and objections, my lord, in that sort of fashion. And the drama is a little bit more subdued. But this is really a beginner's taste of what one would expect to find on the way into the legal profession. Now, the legal profession, as you know, and you may have heard, is split into two. Solicitors, in effect, who conduct day-to-day litigation on behalf of people that have a legal issue. They go and visit them, very much like a general practitioner. You go and see your doctor, and if he can't deal with it, or it involves something that requires expertise in a particular field, they will then approach a barrister independent practice. And I am one of those. I qualified in 1993, and I went to a non-traditional sort of university. In fact, when I was interviewed for my pupillage, I was asked the question, so we don't normally interview people from other universities, and I flippantly remarked, is that Leeds and Leicester? Obviously, they were interested in Oxford and Cambridge at the time, but it drew a laugh, and eventually I managed to secure a pupillage. But it was not an easy ride. So that is a little bit of my sort of resume, in the sense that I qualified in 1993. I then went and conducted or did the bar exams in the Caribbean, so entitles me to practice there. But I do a lot of very specialist work. I do a high-end commercial and serious crime. So if anybody at the end of this seminar would like to get in touch, they can do so, and they want some shining light as to where they're going wrong or where they need some help, then, you know, one of the good things about the Young Professional Society is that help is on hand from professionals like myself. And if you're interested in the other fields that they have spoken about, then you can get in touch with them. Now, so first question you always get asked is, why did I choose the legal profession as a career? Well, these are some of the sort of headings that come to mind, because here you have a variety of work. You have an intellectual challenge in the work that you have and that is available to you. So if you want to go into an area where you can do, you're able to go in depth into a particular field, there's lots of opportunities here, because you're sometimes at the cutting edge of law. You might be able to, in your career, set something that goes all the way from the lower courts all the way up to the Supreme Court. So that is something that obviously is very, very important when you're wanting to go into a legal profession. You want to do something, and you want to do something that's good. It's a rewarding profession. It's a vocation. It's a life. You live and breathe it. It's not something that you're doing it because you're going to make a lot of money. That comes secondary, because the love of the job and the fact that you're in a courtroom, as I am, almost every single day, gives you that vocation. And like an old scholar said, doing something that you love, you never have to go to work a day in your life. It is not an easy profession. You're independent of most people. You are working with them, but your independence is one of the reasons why people come to barristers, because we are able to see the wood from the trees and assist, almost like a surgeon, a heart surgeon. We can go in, we can go and deal with whatever that needs to be done. And one of the things that I was very interested in was the ability to advocate on other people's behalf, being able to captivate an audience, being able to speak to them in a language that they understand. So, like I say, there are lots and lots of opportunities to work in the legal profession. It's not always easy, but a successful barrister is never out of work. In fact, when you're a day out of work, you think, well, what's gone on? What's happening? Has my career ended? So there's an element of that, and opportunity is always there, and it's the norm. So, think about it. Now, the current status of the legal profession in the UK, there are lots and lots of graduates who've gone through the education system and hoping to land their dream job. There are difficulties, obviously, in obtaining training contracts. pupilages for barristers. COVID-19 seems to have blown a hole straight through the career path of many people. And what they don't tell you, obviously, I will tell you, because there are no secrets in this profession. It's almost like the oldest profession in the world. And I don't need to tell you what the oldest profession is, but this is a profession where in times gone by, you used to get training contracts because of who you were. It was really for the rich, and they were able to do it as a vocation. It wasn't a full-time job until they changed the way that barristers and lawyers began to practice. So those are the things that are currently facing the legal profession. But those on the starting blocks will find that they will have to start with good GCSEs. That's usually the foundation of any career, and good grades are always vital. So you want to make sure that you progress through those. But it's not essential when you go through other routes which are now available. But a good education is very important, especially when you're going into a profession where being able to speak and put things in writing are essentially the tools of your trade. So once you've done that, you've got to think about what sort of A-levels one is going to do. Some universities prefer academic courses such as English, history, and arts, or sciences. And surprisingly, you'd think that A-level law would assist you when you're wanting to do a degree in law and becoming a lawyer. Well, usually most universities prefer that you don't, because otherwise, then they have to teach you to unlearn some of the skills and some of the studies that you've conducted. But like I say, it's not fatal. If you want to do it and feel that you want to get a taster, that's a good way to get into the legal profession. Currently, there is a new scheme that is going to come in. It's a new solicitor's apprenticeship. It's what the government wants, that hands-on experience. That is a 6-year course that one starts off with having at least good GCSE grades, 5 of them A to C's, and at least 3 A-levels of at least a grade C equivalent. And then in the 4th year of that, you integrate that with a law degree, and you get a hands-on experience alongside people within the profession to obtain competence in skills, commercial skills, and professional conduct. So always think of that if you want to go through a slightly different route into the law. But for those people, for example, you've done a science degree or you've done an arts degree, and wanting to think that that particular career is not for you and you want to change to a career in law. Well, you don't have to do a law degree after your first degree. In fact, there is such a thing as a graduate diploma in law. So that is a 1-year course, and you can then go on to the professional exams. Or you can always take the traditional route of becoming a lawyer or a solicitor or a barrister, having conducted a 3-year degree in law. And that is usually an LLB. And it covers 7 compulsory subjects, which is public, criminal, contract, tort, property, equity and trusts, and even EU law. I don't know how long that will remain, but at present, those are the compulsory subjects. And then there's all the other subjects that surround law. Law is an amazing web of areas of niche expertise. So you've got that. I've already talked about the law conversion, which is essentially the graduate diploma in law. In fact, there will be, by the end of next year, 2021, there will be a new way of solicitors qualifying, and that's called the Solicitors Qualifying Examination. And they must pass that before they are able to go on to do the professional side of practice. But if you want to go and become a barrister, that is also changing in the next few years. And it is a vocation which has been traditionally very expensive to go into. But now they have opened it up a little bit. The bar professional training course is going to be replaced by new courses. And they are known as the ICCA Inns of Court bar course, the bar practice course, barristers training course. So you will then end up receiving a postgraduate diploma in bar practice. But that still doesn't enable you to work as a barrister, because you then have to do an equivalent of an apprenticeship, which is called a pupillage if you want to go to the bar. But if you want to be a solicitor, you've got to go through a training contract. And before you do that, as a solicitor, you've got to do your 1 year attendance at a legal practice course. That's a vocation. And that's, as I say, that's currently available until 2021, when it will be replaced by the Solicitor's Qualifying Exam. Now, you may find that after starting your career in law, you may want to, completing a law degree, you may feel that things are so difficult to practice. The bar attracts probably the top 5%, less than 5% of the entire education system in terms of the profession itself. So it's an extremely difficult profession to get into, 5%, and it gradually, the pyramid gets smaller and smaller as you get to the top. And many people fall by the wayside. They go into teaching, they go into banking, they go into employment. But it's a good degree to have to go into many other professions. So what are the key skills that one needs to acquire on the way to go into the legal profession? Well, appropriate knowledge and motivation is always an important point to start. Good reading around subjects, reading around material that wouldn't ordinarily attract attention. Because normally what people do is when they go to university, they do the subjects that they do. If they're doing sciences, they stick to science books. Well, law is not one of those sort of subjects. In fact, history is always a good starting point. Literature is always good. So you've got to have that as a starting point. And one thing that is expected is one of high ethical standards and understanding of the role of law, because your duty as a lawyer is to the court first. You must always have the dignity of the court, and your clients, obviously, if there is a conflict, you've always got to uphold those standards. Self-confidence, good interpersonal skills. One would expect anybody going into a profession where most people, because not all lawyers go to court. You'd be surprised that some barristers may hardly ever go to court in their entire life, because they are in such a specialist area that doesn't often require them to go to court. For example, tax lawyers. They tend to advise on a commercial level. They advise companies, they advise businesses, they advise governments. So you've got all those to think about. Variety of sustained interests which reveal a high level of achievement. That is something that I thought I'd include, because you've got to have you've got to be able to go the long haul when one is doing a profession or going into a profession which has which requires a high level of achievement. You've got to be a perfectionist in many ways. Commercial awareness. Now, if you're going into advising a company or advising anybody, you've got to have some understanding of the commercial effect of your advice, because you could advise in a vacuum, but there's no point advising in a vacuum. You've got to have some knowledge of what the real world is like and how that particular piece of advice that you're giving is going to impact that individual. Negotiation, project management skills, those are all skills that one would expect to have in any profession that you go into. But legal negotiation is a specialist area. And being able to negotiate where you've got competing interests is something that is a very valuable skill to have. Attention to detail is something that I don't think I need to add to, because if you're going into something, you've got to be detailed, you've got to see the fine print. As they say, you know, photocopying contracts sometimes take 30, 40 pages. And I'm not sure any of you have ever read a photocopying contract or even a contract for a mobile phone. You sign contracts because you think there isn't much that you could argue with the person that you're contracting with. These are big major organizations. If you don't sign your contract, you don't get the product. And finally, the skills of being able to speak a different language. I think that's a very good thing to have. It sets you apart. It allows you to think in a different language and different understanding of cultures is always a good way of utilizing that skill, especially when you are dealing with witnesses. So when somebody is talking about a particular aspect of something, you're able to say, well, actually, I understand that, and I don't think that's quite right. So what is in it for you wanting to go into the legal profession? Well, you've got, as I say, you've got an intellectual reward of being involved in a cutting edge profession where you are having to express your opinion on material, and you may have a substantial amount of a material. I've done cases where you've had 20, 30 lever arch files that you have to master and master them in a very short period of time. You've got to be able to dissect those files and extract those parts that you need to win a case or argue as to why the other party shouldn't win or get what they're asking for. Now, as far as the work environment is concerned, the legal profession does have its lonely parts, because you are spending a lot of time by yourself preparing cases. Sometimes you have the input of solicitors or clerks or assistants or other barristers, but it is very rich and rewarding. There are lots of people, especially when you're in chambers, you can always ask other members of the profession about a particular thing that is concerning you. So you have a rich and diverse work environment. Now, there are specialities. I spoke about this earlier. There are specialities from, in fact, I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail later, but the opportunity to help others is an area where I find very rewarding, because you are affecting people's lives. You are sometimes changing somebody's life or career path in a particular way that nobody else can. So you have to take great care when you are dealing with other people and how things are going to affect them. And earning potential, I put that last, although I'm not sure, I'm sure some people might put that first, because the ability to earn substantial amounts of money, you know, it's not uncommon. People earn hundreds of pounds an hour, 500, £1,000 an hour. But those are the creme de la creme of the legal profession. So those are things that you must bear in mind. Talking about diverse specialities, here we are. There's the areas of complex litigation. You've got jurisdiction issues. You've got, especially when you've got European, you've got American and Asia law. These are all complex matters that one has to look at. You might seek guidance from other companies or other lawyers from other countries. Corporate law, commercial, those are things that might interest you. Tax law, obviously, that's a very specialist area, and it attracts very, very clever people who have got probably first-class degrees in mathematics and law, and they're able to work in a particular sort of field that interests them. Intellectual property, well, we know all about intellectual property. Every time you take a can of Coke or have a packet of crisps, those are things that are protected by copyright, music videos and the like. These are things that are valuable assets, and in fact, in this day and age, these are things that need to be protected. Gone are the days when you used to have Microsoft Office and there used to be a copy for everybody, but now everything goes online. So we've moved away. Companies need to protect their intellectual property rights. Blockchain is another. That's another way of how businesses are being conducted, how they are being paid for, and how the complete chain needs to be legally secure. And then you have the areas of healthcare, negligence. Healthcare is obviously something that is very much at the forefront of what's going on at the moment, because there are lots of people who are not able to go and see their doctors, and if they are if they do go to see them and nothing happens, it is very prone to litigation. So that is also something that may interest you if you want to come into a profession where you have lots and lots of opportunities of specializing. Environmental is another area where I'm sure people nowadays are always worried about how things are affecting, how companies are polluting the environment, what their products are producing. Those are all things that need to be borne in mind. Then you have, obviously, criminal law. That's where a lot of people are interested in. They find that dealing with crime in a particular way, it's adversarial. You are pitted against the prosecution or the crown, the state in effect, and you are there to protect people's interests. COVID-19 has brought about a whole new area of criminal law where many people, in fact, the police are unclear. The courts are unclear as to whether or not somebody should be prosecuted or whether or not an offence is made out. And we know that recently there's been some cases where people have been convicted and later found out there was no offence known to law. And once you go through the criminal system, it changes your life. So that is a very important area of law. Civil rights. Well, civil rights is something that obviously people are very interested in, and it's always been present. Started off in the 50s and 60s. In fact, even started earlier than that in the 1800s. That is something that we continuously fight for, and you continue to do or make efforts and make many strides into rights and making sure equality is very much the forefront of anything that is being done. You've got animal rights. Well, I can't see no spelling mistakes there. Immigration. This is an area which has been certainly present since the 1970s of real significance when mass immigration started, and it continues now with what is happening in Europe. The uncertainty of what will happen to individuals who are European residents, whether or not they are entitled to stay within the UK post-Brexit. Another area where there are niche interests is sports and entertainment. That is another area where there are significant amount of expertise required, and it's a wonderful opportunity of getting involved in what's going on at a sports level, at the highest levels of sport and entertainment. And then you have the area of employment. Whenever somebody is hired or fired, those things that need to be looked at as to whether or not those individuals have got rights, and whether or not the employer has rights in relation to material that the employee may have had in his possession and seeks to exploit at his new employer. These are all things that need protection, and employers and employees need that protection. And I mustn't forget family law and education and estate law. These are all quite an important areas where in this day and age, the nuclear family is now no longer the important, the most important family unit. It used to be grandparents and families living in the extended environment, and that sort of, and now there's a lot of individuals who are choosing to live a different type of life, and they're entitled to the protection of the law for that. So those are all areas that I hope do interest you. Now, this is a slide, and if anybody requires a copy of it, it sets out quite a good way of a way of entering into the profession. I think I've already dealt with some of those, but there is the Chartered Legal Executive, or CLEX. Those are an additional way of qualifying into law. So you can do various stages. In fact, if you've got a law degree, but you don't go and complete the professional exams, there's still a way into the profession. So I hope those are things that interest you. I don't know whether I can usefully assist Nasser, Dr. Nasser at this stage, if there's any questions.
Okay. Okay. Did you want to stop that sharing, or?
Well, yes. I'll go back to the beginning. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Khadim, Barrister Khadim, for a very excellent presentation. A lot of information there for the youngsters who are watching, joining us on Facebook and also on Zoom. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions. So as I mentioned at the start, if you've got any questions, please do type them in the chat box. I believe we do have Professor Waqar Ahmed who joined us as well. So welcome, Professor Ahmed. Okay, I think we'll start off. Somebody's just asked a question here. Can you explain a little bit more about the route to law via the GDL from a science background? Do they put you at a disadvantage? That's
no,
from Hania.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. You don't have to do a law degree to become a lawyer. In fact, many people from the sciences and other particular, I mean, there's doctors, there are pharmacists who then become barristers or solicitors, and that experience of a different type of degree helps them. For example, if they're going into medical negligence, they have a better understanding of that particular science, and when they are cross-examining an individual, they are in better standing. So in fact, it is an asset. in fact, it's encouraged, and I always encourage people to do something that is not the normal. So if you want to go and do a graduate diploma in law, which is what you would have to do, that's a 1-year course where you do the essential core subjects of law, and then you can go on to become on to the next ladder, which is just the professional exam, the solicitor's exams or the barrister's exams. I hope that's clear.
Someone just asked another question. Can you reject cases that go against your personal morals?
Barristers have to work on the cab rank rule. That's a fundamental rule that we all operate on. If you are competent and capable of doing a particular type of case, you can't then say, I'm not doing that. In fact, it could be a professionally disciplinary offence.
Someone's asked a question, if you go abroad, do you have to do more exams and get local training? I see you're qualified in West Indies as well.
Yes, you've got to do the exams and qualify in the local laws, because whilst many Commonwealth countries, you may be able to cross-qualify. I know that I had to go and do a course for 6 months and then do the exams. So it won't make a difference as long as you've got a good, sound knowledge of law in a degree in this country and qualified here. You can virtually go almost anywhere in the world and practice, except, I suppose, America, where people from one state cannot practice in another state. And barristers and solicitors in England and Wales cannot practice in Scotland. So I, as a barrister, cannot practice in Scotland because their law is different.
Okay, well, there's some other questions, but let me just ask one question. Why did you choose to become a barrister, not a solicitor?
I always wanted to go into a profession where I was able to use my skill of advocacy. Although now the distinction of being a barrister and a solicitor is getting less and less, because solicitors have the ability to go to court. They become solicitor advocates, higher court advocates, and they do it, but they don't do it on a day-to-day basis that barristers do. That is not to knock a solicitor and that they don't do a good job. That is not to say that, but there are many solicitors who are very experienced in criminal matters and civil matters that go to court. But it is what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I love the opportunity of going into court and arguing with judges or arguing with witnesses or arguing on a particular area of law.
Another question, is an LLM necessary, or is it just bonus points in form of a degree?
LLM, if you want to go into a particular niche area of law, for example, public international or something of that, then a master's is helpful. Some people go and do their degrees in a university which is not the Oxford and Cambridges and the big, almost like the Ivy Leagues. And then what they do is they go and do a master's at Oxford or Cambridge or one of those types of universities, so that their chances of pupillage or training contracts is enhanced. But it's not a necessity.
Okay. Yes. Right. You mentioned in your presentation the different areas of law. Now, which of the areas are lucrative?
Well, if you want to go into tax, you'd be a very rich person right from day one. In fact, their apprenticeship, the amount of money that they pay a junior trainee is 3, 4, 5 times as much as anybody going into any of the other areas of law.
Another question is, do you need a very high IQ to be successful as a barrister?
Well, I think the ability to persuade doesn't require a high IQ. You don't have to be an Einstein to be a lawyer. As a barrister, what you do have to have is the ability to analyze great amount of material and then utilize that and deploy that when you're in court or when you're drafting documents. So IQ is intelligence, but there's different types of intelligence. Being able to see somebody who's talking nonsense or arguing something which is wrong, and you're able to pick up on that, that is a skill which, as a barrister, you can deploy. In fact, one of the best judges that many law students ever hear about was Lord Denning. He had a third-class degree, and he went on to become the Master of the Rolls, one of the most senior judges in this country. So those people were exceptionally bright, but they didn't have a great degree.
Yeah, we have another question from a youngster who says, how much lying is involved or twisting the truth or in the profession?
And there's always, people always say lawyers and liars, there's very little difference. But in terms of barristers and the legal profession just generally, you've got a duty to the court. You can't lie. If you can interpret something and argue that something means something, you're perfectly entitled to do that. But what you're not allowed to do is actually lie to the court. If you're aware that your client is lying, for example, a client is saying, I did it, and you say to the judge, he did not do it, that is not acceptable. And there have been opportunities incidents when I've been asked by a defendant saying, well, I'm guilty, but I don't really want to, I don't want to plead guilty. Can you argue that I'm not guilty? And I will make it very, very clear that once you admit it to me, then you're effectively admitting it to the court, and you've got to go guilty. You cannot represent somebody who is guilty as being innocent. What you can do is you can challenge the evidence, but not to say that he's not guilty. You can test it.
Okay, there's a question from someone who says, if someone wanted to pursue a legal career, but due to family commitments can only obtain an LLB law degree through Open University, but wanted to ask how reputable that law degree will be in comparison to attending an actual university.
Well, if you can do a degree and you get most requirements now, most professional organizations require a good 2-1. Not a 2-2, but a 2-2 is not fatal. So I don't think the place where you get your university, because the person that is applying for a post will put down what other skills that they have that they will bring to the table. Because law is one of those professions where you bring a lot to the table. Your experience outside of the law brings you into a profession where everybody is unique.
So I'm sure you're dealing with cases on a daily basis. How long does it take you to prepare a case from start to finish?
Well, when you first start off doing your, when you're first on your feet, as they say, to going into court after your first 6 months of pupillage or in your training contract, you tend to pick up cases which are given to you about 5 o'clock the previous day. So you have to go home, prepare it. But they tend to be small cases, something that you might go and have to do a bail application or an application in relation to something in the county court. It requires obviously a great deal of time when you're starting off. I mean, now something like that, I would probably take 5 or 10 minutes to prepare. But when you're starting off, it will take you several hours because you want to make sure that you've not left any stone unturned and you read every single piece of document that there is. But with experience comes the ability to extract what you need for a particular case.
There's another question. I'm looking at medical negligence, but can't find many opportunities. Is it important to have that work experience before starting a law career?
Well, you will find that anybody wanting to go into any profession, whether it's law or anything else, you must start very early. You must start thinking about work experience in solicitors' offices, work experience with barristers, work experience in courts. You can go into court and shadow a judge, which is always a good thing, and it's there in your CV. Working in Tesco's is advocacy. Working in McDonald's is advocacy. Working as a taxi driver is advocacy. Those are things that shouldn't put off anybody if they're wanting to go into a profession where you have so much opportunity. But like I say, it is a well rewarding profession.
Yeah, someone's asked another question. How do you build your reputation as a barrister so that cases will come to you? Well,
experience, you start off something small, you might get a lucky break. I mean, in fact, there was a very famous libel lawyer, and he did knockabout cases for about 20, 30 years. And then all of a sudden, he did one case which he just got by accident. And then he became the most famous libel lawyer ever. So each case that you do builds your skill base.
Yeah, so just in connection with that, what has been your most memorable case which you fought and won, would you say?
Oh, there's been many. I've won many, I've lost many, but I've been involved in some serious cases where, you know, one particular one was an adoption case where criminal offences were committed by the parents, because what had happened was a family came from abroad, and they came to visit some very good friends of theirs who were childless, and they ended up, you know, the rights or wrongs of it. They left one of the children to live with the childless couple and to be brought up as their own. And I mean, it was a compassionate act on their part, but the law doesn't see it in that way. And I remember they'd been advised that criminal offences had been committed because it's outside of the family, and that sort of adoption. And we then had to have a full 5-day trial in the High Court, which the judge, who was a very, very, very good family judge, saw the compassion that this family had for this child and the need of him. He granted the adoption order. The Home Office and Secretary of State appealed it. We went to the Supreme Court, and we won that case. I mean, that was something that changed a young person's life and a family's life.
Okay. You mentioned, so you do lose some cases as well. I'm sure that, you know, losing a case doesn't look, it's not good for your profile and that, but would you not sort of assess a case prior to taking it on, thinking that, oh yeah, you will be able to win, or you just take it on and then see what happens?
Well, sometimes you have cases. I mean, I've done cases where there have been 6 defendants in a case. 5 of them have pleaded guilty, and you say to your client, the evidence is stacked against you. You've got a witness who's saying that there were 6 people involved, and he names you as being involved, and you did something in particular. 5 people have pleaded guilty, so he must have been telling the truth about them because they've accepted their guilt. But what about you? He said, no, I am not guilty of this offence. And it's not often, but I obviously emphasize the evidence against him, and that the chances of him being found guilty were very high, and he was going to receive a very substantial sentence. But he was adamant that he was not guilty. We had a trial. He gave evidence. The complainant gave evidence, and I was able to establish the reason why he had blamed my client was because he did not stop the others, and he was blaming him. And it was only because of that advocacy and the ability to be able to cross-examine somebody and try to get to the truth of something that he walked free.
Yeah. So have you ever experienced judges, yeah, who have erred in law? Does that happen often?
Yes, it does. And the great thing about the profession in this country is all trials are recorded. We're able to then obtain transcripts, and judges are wrong. And there's many cases where judges are wrong. The appeal procedure allows for those things to be corrected. But it's not something that happens on a daily occurrence. Judges are very experienced, and they are told that they have to stick by the rules in terms of guidance to the juries or directions in law. But most of the time they get it right.
So is it correct to say that being a barrister is a stressful profession?
Extremely stressful. You are.
How do you deal with the stress?
Well, having a good family, having good friends, and the ability to actually wind down. You've got to be able to leave your work behind, because if you don't leave your work behind, you're going to end up seriously unwell mentally, because some of the work, some of the cases that you do, some of the work that you do has an impact on you, and it's a gradual impact.
Thank you. We'll take some questions from youngsters here. If you don't study at a Russell Group University, are chances of working or at least volunteering at top firms limited?
The top commercial firms do discriminate against people from the bigger universities, the Russell Group, but don't give up. Don't be disheartened by that, because they are trying to do their best of trying to look beyond those universities, and they are setting up programs to allow people from non-traditional backgrounds to get training.
And how many cases does a typical barrister take in a year, say?
I probably do trials. I mean, my trials tend to be several weeks long, so you don't end up doing that many trials or that many cases. So you might only end up doing 8 or 9 big cases in a year. But you could be in court 5 days a week. On each of those days, you can be doing a different case.
Okay, so someone's asked, what type of voluntary work would you recommend while studying a law degree to help you further your experience in continuation with the comment about shadowing a barrister or judge? How could I obtain that place?
There are schemes that are run by either the university. You've got to go through the law school, and if that doesn't work, you can contact individual barristers' chambers, solicitors' practices. Write to them, email them. You may get a lot of rejections, but you will get a response from people, and somebody along the way will give you an opportunity, as I did. Because when I left the bar exams, I qualified. I didn't have a pupillage. I had to then go and work for 6 months and use that as a stepping stone to get into the profession.
How often do laws change, and what is the process of changing the law, and how do you keep it updated?
Well, I can tell you one thing, that almost everything that I ever learned at university has changed. And sometimes, there was a recent case in the last few years that the law had been wrong in relation to a particular area of joint enterprise. And the Supreme Court said that it'd been interpreted wrong for decades. So you've got to continuously keep up to date with what goes on, and specialism allows you to do that.
I was asking, how many days off does a barrister get?
You can take as many days off as you like. Because you are self-employed, there are no benefits, there's no sickness benefit, there's no pension that you get from anywhere else. So if you want to work 3 days a week, you can work 3 days a week. If you want to work 7 days a week, although only 5 of those days will be in court, you can work as much or as little as you need to.
Okay, I think we'll take one youngster's question here. Are there certain things you can do while studying to make you more highly regarded to employers?
Of course, public speaking, go and do some debating. Public speaking is always a good area. And Dr. Nasser runs a program to help people give those sort of youngsters the opportunity of developing those skills. So do those. What else? Reading out aloud is a very good skill, because once you read something out aloud that you've written, you realize that what you've written sometimes doesn't make sense.
But is it true that sometimes the judges have bias against certain barristers and favor others?
Well, there may be an element of that, but in terms of arguments and submissions, you make them, and usually the arguments succeed.
So how has COVID-19 impacted your work in courts?
Well, for the last several months, since March in effect, I've not been to court very often physically. Courts are now coming back on stream, but they're working at 30% capacity. They're not able to do multi-defendant cases. So if somebody is charged and there's 3 or 4 people with them, it's unlikely that you're going to have a trial this year, or certainly not for the foreseeable future, next 3 to 6 months. But if you've got a single defendant case, you can do those trials. And I'm doing lots of hearings on Zoom, or in fact it's a Skype-based platform, and judges are now becoming more and more familiar. And it's certainly changed the way that I've worked, or I'm working, because before I may go to court and maybe doing a hearing for 10, 15 minutes, but it'll take me 2 hours to get there. Now I can do that hearing in the comfort of my own home, and do that over the video link. It takes 10, 15 minutes. You can upload the arguments that you have, or the like, and you can have a better quality of life. And I hope that is to stay.
It's interesting you mentioned Skype and Zoom, and I was going to ask, how has technology changed the way lawyers operate?
Well, people always think that most judges are very old and can't use a computer. That has all changed. In fact, they've had to learn how to use computers, and they're becoming very good at it, because the pen and paper is always something that judges rely on, because they make notes in their little books, their red books, and now they're having to use technology. They're having to see the papers that they've got in a case. There are no physical papers in criminal trials anymore. 99% of the material is digital, and that has been a really good step.
I think some youngsters are typing some questions here. We'll just take 2 questions and that's it. What is a solicitor's process of researching and presenting a case? Is there a lot of reading, writing required out of office hours? How do you allocate time for rest and disconnect from work? How do you maintain your balance in your personal life? Well,
as a solicitor, you tend to work, the sort of hours that you would work vary, but it tends to be more of a regular job for most solicitors. But there are those solicitors who work 18 hours a day, 17 hours a day. They're out at night, they're going to the police stations and the like. So preparation sometimes has to be done on the hoof. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. Sometimes it takes longer, but your case comes first. So if you have to work those long hours and burn the midnight oil, you have to do that, because the last thing you want to do is to turn up at court not prepared.
So how do you see yourself developing in the next 5 years?
Well, I hope to retire in the next 5 years. I've been doing this job for 27 years. It's a very busy practice. I'm involved in some of the biggest cases that we've seen in this country. And it's time to see how things go and let the next generation come forward.
Okay, final question. What advice would you give to youngsters? You say, you've got a lot of experience in what would you say to those who want to become lawyers?
Read and read and read. Learn about other things, about the world, get to know, and interaction with other people. Do not forget that interaction builds character, builds people's ability to look at another individual. How you interact with that individual has a great impact on the way that you conduct your practice and your profession.
Because there's a lot of youngsters, they're doing LLB and qualifying as lawyers, but then they have problems in trying to get training contracts, and even barristers might not get pupillage and stuff like that. There's a lot of challenges there as well.
But you mustn't ever give up. If that is your dream of becoming a barrister or a solicitor, never give up. Never let anybody else say to you that you can't do it, because if you persevere, it may take a little bit longer, but you will do it. There's always room, as they say, at the end.
I think I'll answer this. Hani has asked, any books recommended? I think what Barrister Khadim was implying was just general reading, probably. Any books? Any books, anything that
you like, anything that interests you, read. It doesn't matter what it is.
It's very, very important, as Barrister Khadim has sort of mentioned, that you have good soft skills. Yeah, so you have to be dealing with people, and that's something that we do in young professional societies, trying to help youngsters develop these soft skills so that they become more successful in their careers. So I think we'll wrap it up there. What time? It's just been an hour, 8:05. So I'd like to thank Barrister Khadim Al Hassan for a very interesting talk that is given, and for answering the questions that the youngsters have put forward to him. I'm sure a lot of people will have benefited. And if you do have any more questions for Barrister Khadim, maybe you can send us by email or so. And thank you to all those people who are joining us on Facebook live stream. And we will upload this webinar on our YouTube channel. And Barrister Khadim, thank you very much for your time. I hope everybody stays safe. And thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye. Thank you.